I was standing in front of the old barn door the evening the sun was almost gone. The gold light stretched long across the grass and settled on my shoulders. The leather cowboy hat was behind my back, both my hands holding the brim, like I was holding on to everything I had left. She leaned against the wooden frame, her pale blue dress moving in the evening wind, watching me with eyes that never blinked. I said, "Let me work on your farm." She smiled, so soft it was almost silent, and then she whispered, "I don't need a farmhand." My heart beat a rhythm I had never heard before, and I knew all of this had started a long time ago. My name is Langston Avery, and I am 34 years old. I am writing this from a wooden table by the window, looking out over a field that 6 years ago I did not even know existed. Funny how a man can build a whole life on a piece of land he never planned to see. I did not start out with dirt under my nails. I grew up in Atlanta, went to Georgia Tech, and walked out with a degree in structural engineering. For 5 years I worked at a firm called Thornwell and Associates, drawing the bones of buildings that other people would live and work inside. My hands used to hold blueprints. These days they hold a hammer. I do not tell you that with any sadness. It is just the truth of how a road can bend. I married Tanya when I was 25. She wanted things I never learned how to want. The parties, the cars, the names you were supposed to remember and drop at the right moment. I only ever wanted to come home by 6 and sit still for a while. That was the difference between us, and at first it looked small. It was not small. We divorced when I was 27. No children between us. No big fight, no thrown plates, no screaming in the driveway. Just a silence that got thicker every year until one morning it had become a wall, and neither of us could remember who built it first. One January morning, I loaded everything I owned into my pickup and drove 4 hours north, out of the city, to a small town called Sutton Creek, Georgia. I did not know a single person there, and not one person there knew me. That was exactly why I chose it. A man who has been someone's disappointment for 2 years starts to crave a place where nobody has an opinion about him yet. I rented a small house on Miller Road and started taking whatever work came. Repairs, first, then building. A fence here, a roof there, a foundation poured before the summer heat. 4 years went by like that, and slowly my hands learned wood better than they ever knew steel and concrete. The people in town started calling me the fellow up on Miller Road, the one who shows up when something is broken. That was enough for me. I had spent my whole life trying to be more than enough for one person, and it turned out being just enough for a quiet town felt a lot more like peace. I knew about the Caldwell farm the way you know about a landmark. It sat on the edge of town, 80 acres, an old barn built out of oak, and a white fence that had started leaning years back. People said Dale Caldwell passed away late in 2021 and left the whole place to his daughter. I saw her a few times at the hardware store. Blonde hair pulled up, a long list in her hand, staring at a shelf of bolts and nails like she was solving an equation nobody had taught her. I did not talk to her. I did not talk to many people. I had gotten good at being a shape in the background of other folks' lives, and I told myself I liked it that way. Then, last August, the storm came through and tore the porch roof clean off the Meredith place at the end of the road. I went and rebuilt it, and I did not charge her a dime, because she was 83 years old and lived alone, and some things you just do because there is nobody else standing there to do them. When I finally climbed down off the ladder, I saw a white pickup truck parked along the road. Harper Caldwell was leaning against the door of it, looking at me. She did not wave. She did not say a word. She just stood there for a moment, and then she drove away. I did not think much about that moment. I told myself it was nothing, a neighbor slowing down to watch a man work, the way people do in a small town. I should have thought about it more. I should have wondered why a woman parks on the side of a road just to watch a stranger fix a roof that was not hers. It was March when Harper showed up at my workshop on Miller Road. It was the first time I ever heard her say more than 2 sentences in a row. She stood in my doorway with that same long list in her hand, and told me the barn needed new crossbeams, the west fence was broken in 17 places, and she did not trust anyone else in the county to do it right. "I saw you fix Mrs. Meredith's porch," she said. "Nobody in this town fixes a thing for free unless they actually know how to build." I said yes, because it was work. It was a big job, weeks of it, and I needed the money the way any man needs it. I did not think there was any other reason she was standing there. I did not think there was any reason at all, beyond a broken fence and a leaning barn. I could not have known that this ordinary Tuesday morning, with the smell of sawdust in the air and a stranger's truck idling in my drive, was the beginning of everything I got wrong and everything I got right. The first day I came out to the farm, Harper walked me back to the barn. On a wooden peg beside the door hung a leather cowboy hat, brown, the brim wide, the leather cracked just a little with age, an old sweat line still darkening the band inside. She reached up, took it down, and held it out to me with both hands. "The way you offer something that means more than it weighs. It was my father's," she said. "He'd want the man working this land to wear it." I put it on. It fit like it had been shaped for my head. I did not understand why she smiled the way she did when she saw me wearing it. A small, private smile, like something she had been waiting a long time to see finally come true in front of her. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. A woman does not put her dead father's hat on a hired hand's head. She puts it there because in her mind, he already belongs. I worked that barn from sunup to the middle of the afternoon, and every single day around noon Harper brought me lemonade. Always in the same green glass. Always with ice. And always set down on the step. Never handed to me directly. Like she had figured out the exact distance that would keep me from being wary of her, while still keeping herself close enough that I always knew she was there. I did not read anything into it. A man fixing your barn gets a cold drink. That is just manners in the South, I told myself, and I believed it, because believing it let me keep my hands steady on the wood. But the days started stacking up into something warmer than work. She would cook dinner and I would wash the dishes, and neither of us ever decided out loud that this was how it would go. In the long afternoons, I replaced fence boards and listened to her talk about her father, how Dale dug a well by hand when he was 72 years old because he did not trust the men who quoted him a price, how he named every horse he ever owned after a city he had never once been to, so that a plow horse got called Denver and an old mare got called Savannah. I listened, and I did not know I was listening to more than a story. I did not know I was listening to a woman hand me her whole world one piece at a time and wait, with more patience than I deserved, to see if I would hold it carefully. One afternoon I came back from the lumber pile, and I saw her standing there, leaning against the frame of the barn door. She had on that pale blue floral dress, and the late gold light was falling across her shoulder, and she was just watching me. I almost dropped the hammer. I did not understand why my heart started going faster, why the air felt different all of a sudden, why a woman standing in a doorway could make a grown man forget the nail in his hand. I told myself it was the heat. I turned away, and I went back to driving nails, because a man in my position does not let himself finish a thought like that one. She knew exactly what she was feeling. I was the only one on that farm still pretending I did not. It was April when the black SUV pulled up in front of the house. Bo Caldwell got out, Harper's older brother, tall, brown hair, sharp eyes that never quite met mine. He shook my hand without looking at me, the kind of handshake that is more of a measurement than a greeting, a man weighing another man and letting him feel the scale. He saw the hat on my head. His father's hat. He went quiet all through lunch, and I felt the quiet like weather coming in, that low pressure you feel in your teeth before a storm. When Harper stepped into the kitchen, Bo leaned toward me and said it low, just loud enough for me and no one else. "Daddy would roll over in his grave if he saw you wearing that." I did not answer him. I set my glass of water down on the table, and I walked out to the barn, and I took the hat off my head, and I set it on top of a fence post. The sun came down on the leather, I stood there and looked at it sitting on that post, and for the first time since I came to Sutton Creek, I felt like I did not belong here. I had spent 4 years being just enough for this town, quiet and useful and safe, and one sentence from one man had made me a stranger on the land again, the way a word can do when it names the thing you were most afraid somebody would say. I heard the screen door slam. Harper came out onto the porch. I could not see them, but I could hear her, and she was not shouting, but every word came out with an edge that cut like a saw blade going through green wood. You don't get to decide who wears that hat. Daddy left this farm to me, and I decide who works this land. Bo drove off before dark. I heard the gravel crunch and the engine fade, and then it was quiet again. That country quiet that closes back over everything like water. A few minutes later, Harper found the hat sitting on the fence post. She dusted it off with the side of her hand, and she walked straight out to where I was sitting on the barn step with my elbows on my knees. "Put it back on," she said. I took it from her, but I did not put it on right away. I looked up at her, and for the first time, just for a second, I let myself wonder the thing I had been refusing to wonder. Why does she care this much? A woman does not defend a stranger to her own brother over a hat unless that stranger has stopped being a stranger somewhere along the way, unless somewhere between the first crossbeam and the last fence board, he had quietly become something she was not willing to lose. I held the hat in my hands and I felt the question sitting in my chest like a stone. I could feel the cracked leather under my thumb, still warm from the sun, the sweat line worn dark by a man I had never met, and I thought about how strange it was that a dead father and his living daughter had both decided I fit before I had decided anything at all. The barn stood half repaired behind me, the light going amber over the fields, and I still could not name what was happening between us. I did not know yet that the answer had been standing in front of me the whole time, in a green glass of lemonade set down on a step, in a pale blue dress in a doorway, in a smile I kept telling myself I could not read. I read it fine. I just was not ready to believe that a woman like her would ever choose a man like me on purpose. That was the wall I had carried up from Atlanta. Brick by brick. It was 3 weeks after Bo came through that the rented car pulled up on the dirt road. I was out in the farmyard splitting wood, and I heard the tires on the gravel before I saw her. Tanya stepped out. Straight hair, sunglasses, high heels sinking into the mud like she had gotten out at the wrong address and refused to admit it. She looked like a photograph that had been glued into the wrong album, everything about her sharp and polished and completely out of place against the oak and the dust and the smell of split firewood. She said she had come about some insurance paperwork left over from the divorce, a joint policy that still needed my signature to close out. I remember thinking that was a strange thing to drive 4 hours and rent a car for, a thing the mail could have handled, but I did not say it. I just signed it. I did not fight her, did not ask questions, just wanted it done and wanted her gone. That was always how it went with Tanya. She could make a simple errand feel like the opening move in a game you did not know you were already losing. But she did not leave. She looked around the farm. She looked at the barn I had rebuilt with my own hands. She looked at the hat on my head, and then she smiled. That smile I had lived with for 2 years and spent 2 more years trying to forget, the one that always came right before she said something designed to make me smaller. "The plumber turned cowboy," she said. "Look at you moving up in the world, Langston." Tanya did not leave Sutton Creek. She stayed the night at the motel out by the highway. I know because the next morning Miss Ruth at the grocery store leaned across the counter and told me, "That dark-haired girl was in here asking about you and the Caldwell girl, asking a whole lot of questions." I thanked her and I loaded my truck and I told myself it did not mean anything. I did not think much about it. I should have thought about it. I, of all people, should have known that Tanya never stayed anywhere 1 minute longer than it took to get what she came for. 2 days later, Tanya came out to my house on Miller Road. She sat down on the porch step, crossed her legs like she had all the time in the world, and she talked in the calmest voice she had, which was always the voice she used when she was about to do the most damage. She didn't need a handyman, Langston. She needed you. This whole town has been watching her watch you for 2 years. The woman at the grocery store, the man at the post office, the girl at the pharmacy counter. They all know. That Caldwell woman picked you out before you even knew she existed. You're not her repairman, you're her project. Then she tilted her head, the way she used to when she was about to slide the knife in slow. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Somebody deciding what you're supposed to be without ever once asking you. That one landed. That one went all the way through me, because it was exactly what she had done to me for 2 years of marriage. Deciding who I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to want, who I was supposed to become, and never once asking me what I actually wanted at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And now she was taking that same wound, the deepest one I had, the one I had driven 4 hours north to get away from, and she was using it to shove Harper into the same box she had lived in herself. She had figured out the one thing that could turn every kindness on that farm into evidence against it. Every glass of lemonade, every dinner, every look. She had a way of making love look like a scheme, because to her they had always been the same thing. I did not sleep that night. I lay there and looked at the hat hanging on the back of my chair, a dark shape against the wall, and I asked myself the question Tanya had planted, and the question grew roots. If Harper chose me from the very beginning, then what about the lemonade in the green glass? What about the dinners on the porch, the ones where she let me wash the dishes and never once acted like she had planned it? What about every single time she stood in the barn door and watched me work? Was any of it real? Or was I just a character in a plan I never got to read, a man being quietly arranged into a life he never agreed to? I could not tell the difference anymore between being loved and being managed, because for 2 long years those two things had worn the exact same face across the table from me, and I had promised myself when I drove out of Atlanta that I would never sit across from that face again. That was the cruelty of what Tanya had done. She had not lied to me. That was the worst part. Everything she said was true, or true enough. Harper had chosen me first. The town had watched, and by wrapping a true thing in the shape of her own betrayal, Tanya had made it almost impossible for me to see it clearly. A lie you can fight, but a truth, twisted just a few degrees off-center, will keep you awake until morning. The next morning I drove out to the farm. I did not go inside. I set the hat down on the top step of Harper's porch. Careful, brim up, the way you set down something you are giving back and cannot quite bring yourself to keep. I did not knock, and I drove away, and I watched the white fence shrink in my mirror the whole way home, and I told myself it was the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing a man does when he has already been burned down to the foundation once before. 3 days. I did not go to the farm. I took a job fixing a roof at the far end of town, and every time I looked west, to where the white fence of the Caldwell place rose up behind the row of pines, I had to make myself turn back to the shingles and the nails. My hands knew the work, even when my mind was 4 miles away, standing in a barn doorway with a green glass in it. I heard she never called anyone else to finish the job. The fence I had started was still missing 4 sections. The barn was still short 2 crossbeams, hanging open to the weather, the way I was hanging open to a question I could not close. She was waiting, and I did not know if she was waiting for me to come back, or waiting for the right way to finally tell me the truth. I only knew the farm had stopped, the same way I had, both of us frozen on either side of one thing neither of us had said out loud, and I was starting to understand that the silence I had run all the way to Sutton Creek to find was not the same thing as peace after all. On the 4th day, I heard the white pickup pull up in front of the house on Miller Road. Harper got out. She had the hat in her hands, held against her like something she was not going to set down until it was time. She did not come inside. She stood out in the yard, under the maple tree, and she waited for me to come out to her. I came out. I did not say anything, and she did not say anything either, not for the first 30 seconds, which were the longest 30 seconds of my life. We just stood there, the two of us, with the hat between us and the whole thing unspoken, the morning so quiet I could hear the leaves turning over in the breeze above her head. Then she said it. Tanya's right. I chose you. I chose you before you knew who I was. I saw you build Mrs. Meredith's porch in the rain, and I knew. I knew you were the man this farm needed. She stopped, and her voice went quieter and truer. No, I knew you were the man I needed. She took a breath and kept going, because she had clearly decided she was going to say all of it or none of it, and there was no version of her that stopped halfway. Her voice did not shake. That was the thing about Harper. She had waited 2 years to say this, and now that she was saying it, she was not going to let herself flinch. The farm needing the repairs, that was real. The fence being broken, that was real. But the reason I picked you and not somebody else, that was real too. And I should have told you from the start. I let you believe it was only about the barn because it was easier, and because I was scared you would say no before I ever gave you a reason to say yes. That was the one dishonest thing I did, and I'm done doing it. She lifted her chin. I didn't want a project. I wanted you. And if you don't want to stay, I'll understand, and I'll never say another word about it. But I am not going to stand here and pretend I only needed somebody to fix a fence. She set the hat down on the top step of my porch, the exact same way I had set it down on hers, brim up, careful, a thing being given back and offered at the same time. And then, she turned and walked toward her truck, and she did not look back, because she had already given me the choice, and she was not going to stand there and beg for the answer. I looked at the hat. The brown leather, the small crack along the right edge of the brim, the smell of old sweat and cut hay worked into the band. The hat of a father I never got to meet, handed to me by a daughter I had almost left standing in a yard because I was too scared of the wrong ghost. And I thought about the difference between the woman driving away from me right now and the woman I had married. Tanya had wanted to remake me into someone she could show off, someone louder and richer and easier to introduce at a party, and she had spent 2 years disappointed that I would not become him. Harper had done the opposite. Harper had watched me be exactly who I already was, the quiet one, the one who fixes an old woman's porch in the rain and does not send a bill. And she had looked at that man and decided he was the one she wanted. One woman had wanted to erase me. The other had watched me and chosen me. And I had almost thrown that away because Tanya had found a way to make them sound the same. Those were not the same thing at all. Being chosen for who you pretend to be is a cage. Being chosen for who you actually are is the only freedom I have ever known. I had been so busy protecting the old wound that I had almost let it cost me the one person who had never once tried to open it. The one person who had loved the parts of me that Tanya had spent 2 years trying to sand off. I picked the hat up. Harper. She stopped. She did not turn around. The fence is still missing 4 sections. She turned around then. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. That same smile I had first seen in the barn doorway, except this time there was nothing hidden behind it, nothing held back, nothing waiting. I had finally said the only kind of yes I knew how to say. Not a speech, not a confession, just a man telling a woman there was still work to do, and that he intended to be the one to do it for as long as she would have him doing it. The next week, I drove out to the farm at sunset. I held the hat behind my back, and I stood in front of the barn door. Harper came out. The pale blue floral dress, the blonde hair loose on her shoulders, the gold evening light falling across her cheek, and everything you have been watching since the very beginning arrived right here, in this one moment, with both of us finally standing in the same truth at the same time. "Let me work on your farm," I said, and she whispered, "I don't need a farmhand. I need a husband." I put the hat on my head, and this time I did not take it off again. I finished the barn in July, new crossbeams, the roof relayed, the big door swinging clean without a sound. But I did not leave when the work was done. I stayed for dinner. Then I stayed to wash the dishes. Then I stayed to sit on the porch until the stars came up over the field, and somewhere in there it stopped being a place I drove to and started being a place I did not want to drive away from. It moved slow, the way I have come to think the real things are supposed to. There was no first kiss to mark on a calendar, no big announcement, no single moment either of us could point to and call the beginning. There were only the mornings I showed up earlier than the work required, and the evenings she poured a second cup of coffee without asking whether I wanted it, because by then she already knew that I did, the way you come to know the small true things about a person you have decided to keep. I finished the fence too, all 17 sections. Harper stood at the last one and watched me drive the final nail, and she said, "Well, now you're out of reasons to come around." I looked up at her from where I was kneeling in the grass, the hammer still warm in my hand, and I said, "I'll find another reason." And I meant it as the closest thing to a promise a man like me knows how to make out loud. She took me to meet her mother down in Savannah. Miss Ellen, 63 years old, silver hair, the kind of eyes that read a person all the way through in about 3 seconds and then decide whether to let you know what they found. She did not say much that first evening. She just watched. She watched the way I pulled out Harper's chair. She watched the way I cleared the dishes without being asked. She watched the way I called her ma'am, and I think she could tell it was not manners, that it was actual respect, the kind a man only has for someone he is quietly hoping will one day count him as family. When we walked out to the truck, Miss Ellen caught Harper by the arm and said it soft, but not so soft that I could not hear. "Your daddy would have liked this one." Bo did not come to the family dinners. He did not call to start trouble either, though. The phone stayed quiet, and it was a strange kind of quiet, not warmth, not welcome, but a silence that had started to shift, the way ice on a pond changes days before it finally breaks. I did not push it. Some men come around on their own time, or they do not come around at all, and either way it was not mine to force, and I had made enough peace with my own quiet to let another man keep his. In September I moved from Miller Road out to the farm. I did not even rent a truck. I brought 4 boxes and a toolbox, because after a divorce, a man learns to keep his life small enough to carry in a single load, small enough that no one can ever again make him feel he owns too little to be worth loving. Harper cleared out half of her closet without making a thing of it, just slid the hangers over and made room, the way she made room for everything, quietly and completely. And I hung the hat on the peg by the front door, the same peg where Dale used to hang it, and something about seeing it there settled in me like a foundation curing, slow and solid and permanent and mine. I stood in the doorway a long minute that first evening, looking at that hat on that peg, and I thought about the man who had hung it there for 40 years, and the daughter who had handed it down, and the stranger who now hung it up each night with dirt on his hands and her name in his mouth. It was not a borrowed thing anymore. It was not a test, not a symbol I was afraid I had not earned. It had a place on that wall, the same as the coats and the work boots and the ring of keys. It had a place. So, at long last, did I. I had spent 6 years being a shape in the background of other people's lives, and somewhere on those 80 acres I had finally stepped into the foreground of one, a year later. October, and the oak leaves had gone gold and copper against a hard blue sky. We got married under the oak tree beside the barn. The barn I had rebuilt by hand, the fence I had raised back up one section at a time. There is something about standing to be married on the exact ground you repaired with your own 2 hands that no rented hall could ever give a man, a feeling like the land itself had agreed to hold you. There were not many guests. Miss Ellen sat in the front row holding a handkerchief she never quite used and never quite put away. Miss Ruth from the grocery store brought a cake. Old Cal from the post office took the pictures on a film camera older than either of us, muttering about the light the whole time. And Bo came. I had not been sure he would. Harper had not been sure either, though she never said so. But there he was, standing in the back row in a pressed shirt, and he did not say anything, and he did not smile. But he was there, and I had learned by then that showing up is its own kind of sentence a man can say without ever opening his mouth. Some men apologize with words. Some men can only do it by driving out to a wedding they said would never happen and standing quietly through it. When I turned around after the vows, he gave me a nod. One nod. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Not all the way. Not yet. But a beginning, which was more than I had any right to expect from him, and I took it for exactly what it was and nothing more. I nodded back, and that was the whole conversation, and somehow it was enough. I wore Dale's hat. Harper reached up and straightened the brim for me before we walked back out into the sunlight, her fingers steady, her eyes bright, and she smiled. That first smile I ever saw in the barn doorway, except now there was nothing hidden in it at all. There never had been. I was just the one who had not known how to look. I am sitting now at the wooden table by the window. The hat is hanging on the peg by the front door, the same peg where Dale used to hang it, the same peg where I hang it every evening when I come in from the field. Harper is in the kitchen. I can hear her open the refrigerator, hear the green glass touch the counter, and every ordinary sound of her is the sound of a life I did not think I would get to have. She is carrying our first child. Every morning, she stands in the barn doorway, the barn I rebuilt, and looks out over the field with the same eyes she had the day she watched me from that white pickup truck, and I understand now that she was never just looking. She was choosing, quietly and patiently, long before I ever caught up. Tanya was right about one thing. Harper did choose me before I knew. But here is where Tanya was wrong. All the way wrong. Being chosen is not the same as being managed. Being chosen by the right person is being loved by someone willing to wait, willing to stay quiet, willing to set her own father's hat on the head of a stranger and hope he would understand what she was offering. It took me a long time to understand it, but I understand it now. Sometimes love does not begin with a confession. Sometimes it begins with an old hat, a broken fence, and a woman patient enough to wait for a man to find his own way home. So, let me ask you this. If someone chose you before you even knew it, would you call that manipulation, or would you call that love? And have you ever almost walked away from the right person simply because you did not yet know how to look? If this story reached you, take a second to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me your answer down in the comments. I read every single one,